firearm is seized every single day on the streets of London, say the Met, with gangs fueling a vicious cycle of violence. We speak to one of the many families affected. We start tonight with something that might shock you. Every single day, a firearm is seized from the streets of London, say the Met, adding that gangs are fueling a vicious cycle of violence. Only last month, a 9-year-old girl was left fighting for her life after a drive-by shooting in Dalston. The Met Police say serious gun violence is at a 15-year low, but recognise more needs to be done. That bigger picture in just a moment. First, our reporter Jessica Ure has been out with officers on a firearms raid.
It's 4 a.m. at an unidentified location in West London, and we're out with the Met. This raid has been planned for the last 2 years. The aim is bringing dangerous firearms out of circulation in the capital. We pull up to the first address, along with dozens of specialist officers and police vans. It's one of 11 addresses that the Met are targeting today. The property is identified, and we head inside the building. Today is the last day of Operation Hopefield, an investigation spanning 2 years aimed specifically at taking some of the most dangerous gangs in Westminster off London streets, and specifically targeting firearms. At the first location, 2 arrests are made.
Over the last 2 weeks, I'm pleased to say that we have arrested 52 high harm nominals. We've recovered 10 lethal barreled firearms, 6 imitation firearms, 2.5 kilos of cocaine, and over £100,000 of criminal assets. These offenders are exploiting young people and vulnerable children and causing misery to the communities of Westminster and surrounding boroughs.
Whilst the property is searched for evidence, we get back in the van and wait for the go-ahead. Then it's off to another location, this time a flat above a shop on a high street. The early hour allows for the element of surprise. And again, we head inside.
It's been quite shocking, I think, when we get an insight into the lives of some of these criminal gangs and criminal networks, that we see just how many weapons that they carry. Some are quite shocking. They're Rambo knives, there's swords, there's crossbows, as well as obviously weapons that are capable of killing another human being.
One person who knows exactly how devastating firearms can be is Mother Jackie. She lost her son Tyrese in 2023 when he was fatally shot after a night out in a case of mistaken identity.
I needed to tell my daughters myself, and I remember sitting in the back of the police car, and all I said is, Tyrese is dead. They didn't say anything, they just screamed, and I remember they both jumped out of the car, and I jumped out, and we just held each other, and they screamed and they were crying. We need to talk about firearms a lot more. It's not just about knife crime. No one's talking about gun crime. Believe me, gun crime is real. Gun crime is so real.
In total, Operation Hopefield targeted 42 addresses in the last 2 weeks. The hope is that every weapon seized could be a life saved. Jessica Ure, BBC London.
Well, I mentioned the bigger picture, and with more now from New Scotland Yard, our Home Affairs correspondent Sonia Jessup sent this report.
Following the shooting in Dalston, the Met's been trying to reassure Londoners about what it's doing to try to tackle gun crime and keep Londoners safe. Recent figures from the Office for National Statistics showed there'd been a 20% rise in overall gun crime last year. But the Met says that when you look at lethal barrel discharges, so that's lethal weapons actually being fired, that's down to the lowest level in 15 years. It says around half of that is being driven by gangs and organised crime. But it says it's bringing more prosecutions. So in more than half of cases last year, an offender was brought to justice. Of course, that lends itself to the question, what about the other half? I've been asking about what the key challenges are.
Well, I think the key challenges are about the trust of the community and victims themselves. Often the victims are engaged in criminality, is the reality of it, and they need to trust us to keep them safe and for us to prosecute those who've inflicted such awful injuries to them. So some of that is again about building trust within the community. Come forward, step forward and give evidence to us.
He said another key concern is converted weapons, so blank firing guns, which are often used legally in dramas and in farming. Criminals are getting hold of those and illegally converting them into lethal weapons. And he said around one firearm a day was being seized from London's streets last year. Around 46% of those, he said, were these converted weapons. He said the likelihood of being a victim of gun crime in London is still very low, but as we saw in Dalston, sometimes innocent bystanders are being caught up in crossfire. He said building trust with communities will be key to getting that intelligence and getting those weapons off the streets.
That was Sonia Jessup, our Home Affairs correspondent outside New Scotland Yard.